recording.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. Let's go. I'm going to give you a short intro and then we can get into it.
Sounds good.
Awesome. We're live. I'm going to edit this part out, but we're just going to talk. Awesome. Hello, beautiful people. It's Kat, and welcome back to This Human Thing, a podcast on the human experience, where we have honest and real conversations about this human thing that we're all doing, learning to connect deeper to ourselves, to others, so we can live more vibrantly, however that looks for you. And this show just exists to serve and offer different perspectives of the reality in which we're all living and how can we live it more fully. So today, in episode 2 of This Human Thing, I am kicking it with one of the first people I met here in San Diego, Scott Marciniec, also known in the music scene as Scotty Mars. He is a beast on the snowboard, a bass magician, and has quite the green thumb. And I'm sure there's so much more that he's humbly hiding. From an outside view, I see how you pour passion into everything you do, whether that be making music, or your relationships, or any of your other creative pursuits. And although you sound super cool on paper, the thing that really stands out the most to me about you is just how kind you are. And I really see that in how you interact and move through life. Authentic kindness, and we definitely need more of that. So thanks for being on the show today, Scott. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kat. What an introduction. You got me blushing over here. Well, I'm not sure I can step up to all of that, but still, I appreciate it. I know you met me at, I think, a really good time in my life, too. Right before quarantine, right as I was starting to get more into a lot of the personal projects, you know, with the Scotty Mars and Renegade Sounds and starting up a lot of that music stuff. So, yeah, now that we're just enjoying the summer with nothing else, this is the best time to jump into it, right?
I love it. So I'm really interested on how you got started into making music. So has it been a while, and how did that all get started for you?
So I've wanted to start producing music well before I started wanting to DJ, probably for like 10, 12 years or so. I bought a super early intro version of Ableton, the production software I use now, probably about like 8-9 years ago, and didn't touch it for years. I mean, I would jump in maybe once a year just for an hour, you know, drunk or something, like not really the best way to learn, but never really kept my focus up on it until after Bass Nectar Freestyles 2018. That was the moment I remember we just were really close up there, just watching that dude DJ and kind of seeing him move the crowd and everything was really what, like, when I was flying home, I decided I was going to get a mixer. I was going to start trying to DJ and then work my way up to producing and just really make that the focus of my personal life outside of work.
Wow.
And
so
it's been slow but sure, you know, moving up.
Yeah. So 2018 is when you started mixing and all that. Well, it seems like you, I don't know, from my outside view, even though I'm sure that you would say differently, like it seems like you really know how to navigate all of that. And so that's impressive for just 2 years.
Thanks. Music aside, I'm still very amateur at music theory, like playing piano and that sort of thing. But I've had pretty extensive experience with more of like the creative programming. You know, Adobe, like Photoshop, that sort of thing. I've been doing since high school for classes, some for jobs and things too. So navigating the creative software has always been kind of easy. More just converting over to music and doing that, which has always been such a big part of my life, but never in a productive sense, I guess. So it's been cool kind of making that transition.
Yeah. So speaking of music and all of that, I wanted to ask you particularly, of all people, what music means to you, because I feel like you would have a more in-depth answer, because it really is, there's so much emotion tied into music. And I know a lot of people, if you ask them like, why do you like music? It's like, it makes me feel things, you know, but I feel like you would have a more extensive answer on that.
Right. And I appreciate you for asking that question. I don't have an answer bottled up for it, but I guess the best way to put it into a sentence would be that it's the best like analog, like it's the best analogy for this human thing, for all of like life and what it is, in the sense that it's energy, it's entirely subjective. And I think at a deep root, it does parallel that, like just in terms of how we live our lives, utterly subjective. You can go any way. There's endless possibilities. For me, music, it is just pure expression. I mean, it's pure subjectivity. I don't think there's anything that's more subjective in the sense of there's no right or wrong. There's no really good or bad. It's entirely on personal preference that exists in the world. You know, I don't think that there are rules to follow. You know, there's keys and things like that we all collectively agree sound good for the most part, more of a framework. But within that, again, there's endless variations, and it's just the most elastic, free form of expression that exists, I think. And to me, that's always been fascinating, even before I stepped into the creative role of it, which I'm still just kind of stumbling around through. I think I always really appreciated that aspect of it.
Wow. I've never heard it explained like that before. I'm really glad I asked you that. But yeah, Sorry, that was a long sentence. No, that was perfect. That was a really good parallel. I've never thought about it like that.
Thanks.
And the way that acceptance, you know, everyone has their different genres that they primarily listen to and enjoy, their different scenes of music. And, you know, we can relate that to our normal lives. Like, we have our groups that we hang out with, we have our people and things that we like or dislike, but, you know, just as in music, like, that is something that can really bring us together and connect us no matter what background we're coming from.
I mean, music is pure energy, right? I mean, it's through, you know, sound, through audio waves, but there's no way to put your finger on it and box it up and compartmentalize it. And I think for me, a big thing is realizing that is trying to keep music not from becoming a product. It's something that I've really I've had that exact same conversation with my buddy who I started up the Renegade Sounds, you know, sort of impromptu beach events with. You know, we had talked about that and really wanting to keep it less of like a marketing strategy. You know, so many shows are put on like a tier of lineup of DJs, and it's, you know, it's a way to kind of advertise, to get you there, to make money for the venue, to make money for the artist, and it's just becomes more of a product like anything else. And the experience that you have as a participant there in the crowd is a nice offshoot of that, but that's not the reason that it's being held. So I really wanted to make something with that and have the sole focus of my music and, you know, how we perform it and that thing be that entirely in that realm, like not a product, just the pure energy of it. You know, if you're there, you get to experience it. After it's gone, it's gone. There's no way to box it up. There's no way to bottle it for later. And yeah, sorry, I know my mind tends to kind of go in loops all over the place with no clear linear direction.
That's
so
the point of this podcast. Like that's how a normal conversation isn't so linear.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're doing here, is just like music, or the direction that you're trying to promote with music, it's kind of the same thing. And that's why I really like podcasts, because they're not generally, or the ones that I like to listen to, there isn't necessarily like a call to action. It's not trying to give you one thing. It's very free flowing. We just see where the conversation goes. And that's how life is. Like, there's some kind of patterns, there's some kind of order to it, just like how some sounds in music sound good or not so good together, usually. There's rules and there's order, but within that there's so much space for creativity and expression. And as soon as we try to start putting labels and boxing things up and making products, which gives us a sense of control, but that is limiting our experience so much. And you can see that and how that's evolved throughout history with like Western culture. Right.
I think any of that boxing up, trying to make anything, any concept, more of an external thing you can look at separate from yourself and say, look, I can look at this from all sides and analyze it. As soon as you do that, you're losing the main essence of whatever it is, in my opinion. You know, the best. I mean, you and I have talked extensively on this about, you know, the power of being in the moment and focusing on the now, and like any therapy, Buddhism, it all focuses on living presently, right? as soon as you take something outside of yourself and try to like look at it, try to package it up and sell it, which is funny working in sales myself, like the fact, trust me, there's a lot of dissonance there, I know. But, you know, as soon as you do that, I think you lose the most important aspects of any sort of creative pursuit. You lose that emotion, like that human aspect to it.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And that just further drives that illusion of separateness that we have from each other, from ourselves, from any of the beautiful things that this life has to offer. As soon as we try to take a picture and record and box up every moment, and we do the same thing with ourselves, we tell ourselves, I'm this one thing, and then that's very limiting, because we always have to say, oh no, I'm a person who does this, so I can't branch out and do this.
The labeling,
yeah. And I think in terms of creativity, that limits us so much, and that's why I really believe that everyone has this capacity and this capability to be a creative. And that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. It's like, oh, I'm a creative. Everyone's a creative, just some people express it more than others because they've begun to break down those walls of I am this one thing.
And I think a lot of people too, in trying creative pursuits, want the end goal without having to put in the time and to fail at it, to stumble, to be bad at it and still continue and enjoy it. I mean, I know I've gone through a couple dozen different personal interests in my life that I've tried to get into and haven't really had the interest for and dropped off. And it's not that it's bad to explore things, but yeah, you definitely, when you have a passion for something, you got to push through all the stumbling blocks and the too soft audio on the first podcast and that sort of thing.
Yeah, guys, I've been having some difficulty trying to figure out the technological side to all this. You probably see I keep glancing over at the computer. I'm like, are we still recording?
Is it just fingers crossed that this is working? Well, let me ask you, has there been anything else since you've been in San Diego, say, that you've tried working on it? Maybe it's either fallen completely off or kind of taken a back seat, but are there any other like artistic pursuits that you've tried?
Yeah, the thing that is both a blessing and a curse for me is I just like almost everything. Like when it comes to hobbies and different avenues I could go down creatively, I like them all so much that I keep dipping my toes in everywhere, and I never like jump fully in the water with a lot of things. So, for example, I guess some of the avenues that I've gone down the most deeply are artwork and yoga. And so for yoga, that looks like me teaching and, going to classes and whatnot in a yoga studio where we practice asanas. But expanding that further, yoga means union. It translates from Sanskrit as union or to yoke.
That's cool.
Which really means just to bring connection in your life. And like I was saying earlier, the reason why we experience a lot of negativity in our life is because of this feeling of separateness, or of this feeling of having to identify as one certain thing. Right. And so that's really, I guess you could call it like yoga is the reason that I even wanted to start this podcast. And it's really been interesting as I dive more deeply into my yoga practice, whatever that looks like. And really, like, my yoga practice is just whatever my life looks like at the day. It isn't subscribing to like certain things that I do every single day. Like, it doesn't give me a schedule or anything, but it's just kind of the conscious or maybe almost like background track of being like, hey, everything you're doing is to become more connected, whatever that looks like. And that has actually fueled so much passion into what I do, because it gives me more purpose, and it's helped me kind of break through those identification walls of, oh, I can't do this because I'm not that person. Even if I don't say it explicitly, like, we have those thoughts, those limiting beliefs. You guys can hear the cats meowing. Yeah. I'm at Scott's apartment right now, which is a fun change.
To like knock him down real quick. Hold on. Not physically, just verbally.
Just be like, hey, get off the table, buddy. Yeah, but it's helped me because it's taken the pressure off of, hey, like, anything that I do, I'm just giving it a shot, seeing
Yeah.
if it works out. Like even this podcast, I'm like, well, we'll see how it goes.
And that's a big piece, I think, that people you hear all growing up, right? Like, don't, try again, and all those, what are the words, that parable? Is that what that is? Like
Maybe.
Proverbs, right?
Mm-hmm.
All our American proverbs about trying and failing and, not being afraid to fail and that sort of thing. But we all are. Pretty much everything. Everyone's afraid to fail. And I think social media and how directly interconnected we are, like 24/7 now, has played a big part of that. That there's, people are afraid to express themselves because there's the wall of anonymity is good in a lot of ways, that it can let us reach out to new people and find new communities, but it can also lead to negative consequences too. So I think as much as my time is also spent online, especially now during quarantine, I think it's important to get away from it, get out like we were on the beach, the other weekend, and really be able to connect with people face to face, because I don't think there's anything like that.
Yeah, and talk about like packaging and products. Like our online presence is a complete product.
Right.
And while that, allows us to have so many cool opportunities that we wouldn't be able to, I don't know, like reach otherwise, we do need to take, and I know this is such a cliche thing, guys, get off social media, but it's so important to take a break and take a step back and be like, oh, I'm not this packaged person that's on my Instagram, or my friend is not this packaged person,
And I think it's, the yin and yang and everything. I think that to some degree, for some things, it is important to have a strong identity, to feel, self-confident, have high self-esteem. And for a lot of that, you need labels. Like you need some things that in relation to other people, you feel good about, because everyone does. We're not immune from being human. But at the same time, again, it's all about balance.
Yes, no, definitely. And like with anything we're saying, like we'll say certain statements, but we don't mean them. Like if we're saying don't do this, we're not saying like to do absolute. The opposite of it.
Well,
we don't
no absolute
extremes.
Or no exactly no extremes. Just recognize everything is less of a linear polarity and more of a sphere, like color sphere. Just infinite, every possibility in between. So I've been trying to look at more problems more like that. I think, instead of just a yes or no, right or wrong, left and right, there's so many more angles, so many more dimensions to almost everything.
Yeah, so true.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Okay, let me pull up another question for you. Or sure. I feel like I didn't even really answer your original question all the way. Because I go off on so many tangents.
Are you good?
Yeah, but over quarantine and over the course of this year, I've been getting into a bunch of different things, I feel like. And especially having so much free time has been such a huge blessing.
Right. And
even though a lot of this is a lot of unknowns, a lot of our current state of life is a lot of unknowns, it's been a really good blessing for me. And like there's definitely been times of a lot of confusion and a lot of things that don't feel so positive, but all of those are always pointing me to where I need to go next.
Right.
And so I'm really grateful for all of that. But I've been pouring myself into my artwork a lot. So that has been awesome. Writing more, reading more, doing more activities that aren't necessarily working out.
Gotcha.
So I started skating again. I'm trying to learn how to surf, which isn't going too well.
You got to get out there still, too.
Well, there's been no waves for 2 weeks.
I know. I checked again today. It was like 0 stars, 1 to 2 feet, just completely dead.
I was going to go out this morning, and it was like 1 foot, and I was like, oh.
You got 2 stars tomorrow morning.
Okay, maybe.
It's a possibility.
Maybe.
Give it a hard maybe.
I'm down. I'm so down. But this podcast was like very abrupt, but it's so funny. There's been certain moments in my life where I just kind of feel a pull to do something, and it just sometimes sounds ridiculous, but I just go with it. And I hear that. It's so great. It just feels like something clicks.
The more that I read about like Buddhism and a lot of like law of attraction sort of things, and that I've been trying to rely more on my intuition for that. When you feel that pull, something tells you that you should be doing this, to really follow it. And it's not to say that that can be fleeting, or that can wax and wane in and out, but I think when you really feel consistent pull for something over days or over weeks especially, that's, you have to follow it. You got to trust your heart on things more, even when your brain's telling you that there's no money in that, you don't have time, whatever it is. It's amazing how we can restructure ourselves and our lives and our routines that we think are full, to fit.
Yeah, and like if it's a priority, if it's a passion, like you're always going to have some way to reconfigure your day to make time for that.
For sure.
And it's also interesting when you start to listen to your intuition and you start to, and this isn't to say like every little thought that comes into your head when you're falling asleep to follow, because I've had so many ridiculous things. I'm like, oh my God, that'd be so cool. I'm going to do that. Never happens. But I'm not like upset about it because it wasn't a strong enough pull.
Yeah.
But yeah, it almost feels like once you start listening to, maybe it's like your heart more, I don't really know what to call it, but it's literally just a feeling where you're just like, okay, I need to move in this direction. And that can apply to literally any situation.
For sure.
Like whether that be like a new hobby or a relationship, or even like as small as, oh, I'm gonna take this street home instead of this street home.
Right.
But I
Minor
feel like
things.
Yeah, but once you start becoming more sensitive to, I don't know, let's call it like that little inner voice, things start to feel a lot more easeful. Like you start to enter this flow state.
Right.
And that's also, this is a great transition. That's something I also wanted to touch on because sometimes in my life during, I don't know, just certain times, I feel like I'm in that flow state. A lot of the times life just feels more easeful, and it's not that necessarily anything has changed. Like, there's still traffic, I'm still problems in my relationships, still like things that are bad, but it doesn't concern me.
Right.
And that's kind of that state of flow where you're like a river and there's rocks in the way and the banks are moving, but you're still moving through. And where I first experienced that sense of flow, and where I still experience that sense of flow, is when I have those passion projects. And so I wanted to touch more on with you, or ask you more about the creative flow.
To be honest, as soon as you mentioned flow state, I always think back to snowboarding, at least for like the last year or so, since I've started reading more about meditation and flow states and that sort of thing. And I've come to realize it's not, for me, it's that sport. I think it's anything that you can get entirely involved with. And the main aspect of that being, you're not thinking about it with your rational, normal event processing level brain. I'm not, a biologist. Unfortunately, I don't know like too much about the different parts of your brain and what's working there. But it's when you get out of that part of your brain that's trying to analyze everything, and it's pure action. So like for me, snowboarding, I've just been doing it for so long, teaching lessons for 6 years. For me, that's above and beyond the most like the biggest area where I can get into a flow state almost every time I ride, just because muscle memory and the way my brain's conditioned. And after you do anything, they say 10,000 hours makes you an expert at anything, give or take a few. Once you get that muscle memory in and sort of just get hardwire in the basics of any sort of action, that's when you can really enter that flow state. And for me, with that being in a state of flow, the main aspect of it is, just like you said, pure bliss. Everything becomes easy. It's not that you don't have to try hard at it. It's not that anything's physically exhausting or mentally exhausting, but it's that you don't have any sense of anxiety. It's being fully present, I think, where it really comes down to.
And that is such a good example, because I also love to snowboard. And that's why I fell in love with it. Because at first this is what I do when I pick up a new hobby. I just buy all of it, and then I have it, so I have to do it. Because I used to like be so like money used to be like a huge like stress factor in my life.
Right. Big deterrent.
So like I really value the dollar in that way. So if I buy the stuff, I need to go do it. So and like my friend Lauren, like she would go out to the mountain with me, and she is so good at skiing, and she was just so patient with me as I like tumbled down the hill trying to snowboard.
That's
but even me just falling and falling and falling, I still felt that flow. And so that pushed me to keep going. And then now when I go out and ride, maybe I crash into a tree, maybe I catch an edge and eat shit, but that doesn't matter.
And it's funny that you mentioned that. Really on the other end of the spectrum, where even just constantly falling can still be in a state of flow because you're completely immersed in it. I think that's, if you want to boil it down to just a few parameters, or just want, 2 parameters, it's that. It's being entirely present, focused on it, even when it's negative.
Yeah.
I guess there's negative flow. I never really thought about that before, but
yeah, that's an interesting concept.
Everyone says flow state, like it's something you enjoy doing, yoga or sports or art, whatever it is, dancing especially, but I think there can be negative flow too. It's as long as you're, like you said, you're having fun in the process, that's all it is.
Yeah, no, I haven't thought about it that way either, but yeah, I think about that because, okay, we're talking about snowboarding, which is a physical activity. It's very easy to objectively see someone snowboarding and understand why they would be in that flow state. Yep. But when you translate it to something a little more subtle, which it's still not as subtle, but a little bit more subtle, like you're making music or even like you're cooking a meal or something.
Right.
There's a process involved, and you can be really rushing through making your meal because you have to make it, and it feels forced. And when we talk about flow, it's the same principle that they teach in Taoism. And a lot of people, if you're not familiar with Taoism, it often translates as not doing. And there was a man in my yoga teacher training who was really, he really followed that philosophy. And I didn't completely understand it because I was like, not doing. We can't not do things ever. Like, even if you're sitting completely still, you're still doing something.
Right. As soon as you define nothing, it's not.
Yeah, exactly. But I read this a couple months ago, and it defined the Tao as not trying or not forcing. So in whatever we're doing, as long as we're not forcing it, and it's the same thing as not being attached to the outcome or how that's going to look, but just being exactly where you are and moving in a certain direction.
I like that.
Yeah.
Right.
So like not forcing things has been like a big thing for me.
Yeah.
That
even when things go
for
bad,
me.
just let it happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. And I have been reading a few meditation books and things, and I feel like that's what it all comes down to. It's just letting things pass through, observing, right? Awareness over judgment or over control. Willful control. Yeah. Because we can't control anything. I mean, I can pick up this cup right now, like, yes, I'm controlling that, but in terms of the grand scheme of life and all that, I think there is a lot on the intuition side of things that we don't really, our rational minds can't grasp how they're influencing us.
Yeah, that is such a trippy one. I was listening to this song the other day, and it had this voice recording in the background that would randomly say, "Are you controlling the dream, or does the dream control you?" So it's so fun to think about this. Like, what is your stance on free will?
Because I don't believe that every action is predestined, right? It's less of that, and not so much in a final destination sense, but I feel like if something's meant to happen, it will happen in some form. I mean, if there's a stream moving, right? The stream of life, energy, all that, you can put a rock in the middle. You can build a makeshift dam. The water's still going to find a way around. It's not going to just stop flowing. So that's kind of what it's like. And it comes back to that resisting, like you mentioned. You can try to resist, but all it's going to do is hurt you.
Yeah.
Things are still going to happen. You can stop something temporarily, but whether it's for you or someone else or society or just like the world, if the direction things are going, you can only do so much to try to block it. You have better luck trying to redirect that energy somewhere else. That's why people say focus on what you love, not what you hate. Putting up roadblocks doesn't really work as sustainably as trying to channel that flow, the entire energy, whatever it is. I know we're getting super abstract, but trying to channel that. I'm still picturing like a stream metaphor. I think very visually, so
Me
I know
too.
that might not translate on this podcast as well, but picturing a stream and trying to redirect that somewhere else instead of just putting your hands in the water to try to stop it.
It's like, no. Yeah, imagine trying to like dam a stream with your hands.
Yeah, it just would never work. Like even if you made a dam, right? Like it's still going to go somewhere eventually. It's still going to rise up and over, sides, whatever. Like your best bet if you want it is to get all that energy somewhere where you want it, rather than just looking at what you don't and yelling at it, you know?
No, for sure. And this is actually something that Teddy and I touched on the last podcast, was how we want life to be a certain way and how we're going to lose every single time that we try to fight with life and say, no, what, like, why is this happening, you know? And that's still usually an instinctual reaction, is to question, wait, it's not supposed to be like this. But yeah, I was thinking like of some practical solutions to that, because when we talk conceptually and abstractly, it all sounds good and it's true, but how can we ground that into our daily life?
That's a hard question.
It's so tough.
That is a hard question. You mean, so grounding like an abstract, like your intuitive wish for something. So let's say it's like, you know, art. Let's just say either one, making any sort of visual art. I guess that's too concrete. If you're thinking like, I'm trying to think of something general. Okay, a lot of people want to be famous, right?
Okay.
So they think like that's just a common like desire for a lot of people. Most people wish and wish and wish for that for years, and they might have an avenue, something they try, whatever. To me, it's not focusing on the outcome to get you there. Like, you can have a goal, sure, but so many people focus only on the goal and not the process to get there. I don't know if that's answering your question or not, but
no, actually, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna like tie that in together. I really feel that any problem that you can have can be solved by becoming present.
Yeah.
And again, like, that is so much more difficult to put into action and to live that way than to just say, oh, be present.
Right.
But yeah, just say you want life to be a certain way. You can have a direction. You can have, again, some concept of how you think that life should be. But it seems that on the path, every time you come to a new like pit stop, you might pause and say, oh, that's funny. I thought I was going this way, but it seems that actually the correct path to go is this way.
And the sooner you can get better at that, the easier your life becomes instantly. Because, you know, the what's his name? Some Greek, Heracles, I believe.
Okay.
Some like BC philosopher said the only constant in life is change, which is one of my favorite quotes of all time that I try to remind myself, because when things are good, you want to try to hold on to them. And then when things are bad, again, you focus on the future and out, when really the only way to continually be happy as possible, is focusing on the present.
Yeah.
You know?
The present.
Let me ask you something that I just thought of a minute ago, and you mentioned sleep or dreaming. That's been kind of tripping me up for the past couple months, and I've talked with a few other people. But why do you think that we sleep? And I don't mean like, we all know we need to sleep.
Yes.
We all know that like we will die without sleep.
Yes.
But if you like look, there's still no valid scientific explanation for why any creature needs sleep. As in why? Because our bodies, our minds are almost just as active. We could very easily lay still for, you know, muscle regeneration or anything like that.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Okay, so I feel like my information on this is my own experience, and then I also have like heard a few things from various sources, but I feel like I have two main theories. Okay, so number one is, as humans, we have a disease, which is we are super identified with our thoughts. We're slaves to our thoughts. I want to say, who was this? I think it was Alan Watts. He said, the mind is an amazing slave, but a horrible master. And we're all slaves to our minds, whether we are conscious of that fact or not. Our mind is completely going, like, sit still for a second and you'll just notice thoughts and emotions and whatever popping in. And the reason that people experience anxiety and stress and things like that is because it's so overwhelming to have all of that activity constantly going and feeling like you have no control over it. So I feel like one big reason that we need to sleep is like we just need a break from all of our thoughts.
Yep.
You know, because they say that there's 3 different states of consciousness, and one is like waking consciousness, and one is dreaming, and the other one is deep sleep. So in one, we're in this material world that feels very solid, and then there's the dream state, which things are a lot more bendy and whatnot, and then there's deep sleep where it's just nothing.
Right.
And so I think we just need a break from the activity.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. My conclusion that I've come to on that topic is similar, but in that, I guess one step further, and that deep sleep state, when you really are in there, I think that it's your soul, your consciousness coming up for air on whatever the other side is out there.
Yeah.
So in terms of, when we're in here and we talk about meditation, and it's possible to get in that present moment through training and through practice or psychedelic drugs or various things, various ways to kind of get a sense in touch with that inner consciousness that you have. But most of the time it's watching. Most of the time your rational brain's going, it's passing thoughts back and forth around you. You're focusing on some external thing that really doesn't actually matter in your life or in relation to anything in your world. But we make that so much of our priority. Like you said, our thoughts just consume our whole life, that it's almost like our true consciousness essence, whatever exists beyond our bodies, that's going to continue on indefinitely, and in the reverse indefinitely as well. I feel like that is the time, in a super metaphysical way, for us to almost like come up for air, to take a breath, not so much in a literal like or like we're waking up on some other side, but it's again in a way that we really can't conceptualize, we can't put into words with any of our human concepts that we have. I think there's something there that for me is very spiritual, like more so than most things, most rituals that we do and anything like that we're all man-made to a certain degree. Some part of our rational minds made up different ways of prayer, which are all trying to kind of get at that. For me, sleep is the ultimate, that we can't even help it. That's our ultimate, like, subconscious prayer, I guess.
Yeah. And that's so true. I think we were actually talking about this one time, but we were talking about how you can force yourself to not eat food or drink water, and you can even force yourself to not breathe for a certain amount of time, but you can't force yourself to not sleep. At some point, your body is just gonna lights out, and you don't have any control over that. And so that's so interesting that your body or not even your body, but some part of your brain, right, is like reaching there and is just struggling to get away from our conscious mind, what we call our conscious mind or whatever, which again, I'm not into the whole like simulation theories and all of that kind of thing, but it's for me, there's a lot there that's cool to think about. I mean, on a religious sense, like I consider myself agnostic. Like I don't think anyone can possibly know for sure. So it's cool to question things, and I don't think enough people are okay with leaving questions open-ended, with being able to talk about things. We liked, like we said, about making things products, wrapping them up nicely and holding them out to see or to sell or whatever. I think there's too much in the universe that you can't package up like that, and it's okay to just leave it open-ended. Yeah. And again, like that's a big part of like the message of this podcast is we're having a human experience, but we can absolutely not define our experience. We can't say that it's one thing. All these questions that we're asking, they're fun. Like, who knows if our soul is like merging with God in deep sleep, but it's so fun to talk about. And by gathering these different perspectives, we can gather different perspectives and not see so narrowly, or even just become more aware of how undefined life really is.
Right. And I think you're saying about, kind of expanding your awareness and just seeing more possibilities. All it does is just open up new avenues for good to come into your life. I mean, I don't think there's some, just going along the lines of philosophy or spirituality, that sort of thing. Like, there's some nihilism, like existential nihilism, that like that can be kind of depressing. I was kind of pretty into that post-college, but the negatives aside, yin and yang to everything, I think that the more open we are in any way of thought, the more positive our lives can be. You know, I don't think that opening yourself up to any idea is by itself going to make your life permanently more bad, if that makes any sense.
No, and the reason that I think it makes more sense, or that I've experienced that to be true in my life, is as I expand my the term expand your consciousness or expand your awareness has this like weird feeling of connotation to it, but as I've
used by the pseudo spiritualists.
Yeah, exactly. But as I've I don't know, just expanded my view, expanded the possibilities that can happen, it's not necessarily that life is changing for the better. It's not necessarily that more and more good things are happening to me, but it's just that my perspective is changing. So like, just as we're in that flow state, even though there's obstacles, even though there's times that really, really suck, we're still with it, and we're not trying to get away from ourselves. We're not trying to tell life that it's wrong. We're just surrendering into it and saying like, life is going to be more easy for me, and therefore more easy for other people that are around me if I don't cling so hard to my idea of how I think things should be.
Right. And along those same lines too, like life itself, I don't think can be even good or bad. Like, I mean, first of all, that's good and bad or good and evil, any of that, like that's all subjective. You know, that's all what we define it. But I feel like life just is, because it's everything.
Yeah.
I mean, and that for me, that expands up to like God as well and all that. Like there's the higher up you go in whatever makes the universe exist, whatever it is that you and I are trying to like talk about, the higher up you go, the more all of our concepts, all the polarities and everything just fall away. It just is.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, yeah, I mean, there's nothing else to say past that.
No, exactly. And like through that avenue, that's where we learn to cultivate compassion and joy and peace and all of those things, because we look out at another person, or we look out into life and we're saying, oh, that's a reflection of me. And not to say that everything is like me, Kat, but that we're all connected.
And that each of our little nodes in that connects to the great framework of, you know, human consciousness, the collective, we do have the power to create our own universe around us to a big degree. You know, it turns so many people off kind of talking about that, but like, I do believe in the law of attraction to a certain extent. Like, not that you're going to make magic things, you know, things appear in front of you, but that you can really, really influence through just your thoughts, through just positive thinking, consistent, you know, where you put your mental energy will shape the physical world around you. I've read some really cool books on, there's this one called The Quantum and the Lotus, if you ever want to get into that.
Wow.
That's like, it's one of the coolest books if you're into, you know, Buddhism and meditation and that sort of thing, because it's a really easy, it very easily relates all of those like Buddhist, you know, Eastern practices to Western neurobiology and like quantum mechanics. So it looks at the way in which Buddhism, like these, you know, teachings that have gone on for thousands of years, how they're literally showing the way that like indifference, like it's a concept in Buddhism that nothing is, you know, permanent. There's no solid state. Nothing can actually be one thing, because everything's constantly empty. You know, everything is emptiness at its core. Now they're showing that, you know, with like wave, what's it called, like string theory and quantum mechanics and all that, you know, at its base level, matter is not even a single thing. They're not even a particle or a wavelength. It's dependent on the observer of where you look at it. So I don't know if that just got too far off on a tangent. If you haven't read it,
we're definitely getting super conceptual, but you know, if you follow, that's awesome. If you don't follow, that's also awesome. Like, something that is cool for me is, even though like certain concepts are introduced and maybe I don't get it right away, it's like planting a little seed.
Yeah.
And
true.
It's like cool to be like, oh, I heard about that before. It's interesting. No, but yeah, especially with physics and all of that, like they've narrowed down that inside the atom which is, you know, the smallest particle, it's 99.9999999
Empty.
yeah, it's just space.
Yeah.
And that like 0.00001% is called, I think it's called a quark, and they don't know what that is. So what if that is just more space?
The quarks that make up like the nucleus of an atom is what I was saying, where that they're made up of different parts that can change depending on how you look at them.
Oh, wait, that's so interesting.
So like light, I don't want to like misquote or give any misinformation because I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I know for sure that light waves, you know, when you're looking at light, they transition between a wave particle and like a solid particle, depending on if you're looking at it or not. So that's like the most grossly oversimplified quantum mechanics explanation ever. Please don't ever quote me on that. But I know like the general idea there is right, that it's crazy to try to put that into a better perspective. It's like saying that if you're looking at an apple on a table, it's really a banana when you're not looking at it, but as soon as you look at it, it's an apple. And so what is it? It's nothing by itself. It's somewhere in between. It's not, you can't say that it is some external thing by itself. And now they're proving that the entire universe is made up of things that are not one solid thing. They are not the core of what we're made up of, like what our quote bodies are made up of, is not a literal solid thing that we can box up.
Yeah.
So like at its core, all of matter and reality, you can't box up and put on display because it's constantly multiple things.
Oh, that is like, so interesting.
And again, I know I'm just vastly oversimplifying like decades of research, but like
we're not physicists.
But the idea does hold up, and it's that for me, like that's the coolest thing ever. Like if I've been reading a lot of like religious and spiritual books and stuff, but that sort of thing is by far the most interesting and like explanatory side, I guess, on in terms of like what makes up, you know, the universe and what's most important to focus on, I guess.
Yeah. And you can relate that to like sensation perception as well. Like tying that in with psychology is, you know, the only way that we're able to experience this human thing is through through our sense organs, you know? So we have sensory organs, like our sense of smell, our eyes, our ears, our sense of touch, taste. And if it weren't for these organs, we would be experiencing nothingness. And it's interesting to theorize, like, would we even have like a thought if we had no sensation? You can think people who are in a vegetative state or something like that. Because if there's no input, then we have nothing to analyze. And I don't know, that's a really interesting thing to think about.
And that's where it's hard too, because, well, I think the main thing to keep in mind there is that it's us trying to conceptualize it for ourselves, you know, our rational selves, and we're imperfect. Like you said, it's I mean, literally anything. We're always being updated. The whole idea of like conservative thought is hilarious to me, because like everything is constantly evolving. The only constant is change. So like we're always learning and getting smarter as a species, and this and that. So yeah, like we can try to define it, but that's really egotistic at a certain degree.
Yeah.
Like obviously we all do it and it's okay, but like it's really just for us. Like the universe is going to be fine. The world's going to go on continuing as it is outside of our full understanding for the rest of time, you know? Because even though we are gods in our own sense, you know, and can create our own world around us, which I really do believe, we don't always necessarily understand the way that our actions do that. Or we don't understand all of the implications of like every thought that we have. We don't see all the little subconscious things underneath it. So we can try to grasp it and try to box it up, but it's still just for us, you know? And like you said, it's fun. When it's fun and it's good, and that's great, but I think that's where a lot of problem comes in when people try to force that on somebody else, going against the stream.
Yeah, that element of force. You know? And, you know, we can see that in people who are very stubborn in their views And all that does is create friction and create resistance to the natural flow of things.
Right.
And when we're talking about like don't resist things and don't I don't know, like force things, that isn't to say to not take action.
Right. Or not to really try.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge trap and a big pitfall when you start to like look into this stuff, is like, oh, so I just do nothing? So I just sit on the couch all day? Like, no.
No. It's, and again, it is hard to put into our human words and concepts, but it's not trying at something. It's not even fighting resistance. It's not, I guess it's, if you're going to avoid anything, it's avoiding cognitive dissonance. It's doing something when your brain, your intuition's telling you otherwise. Like, I mean, a good example, I feel like everyone's felt that way about a job, right? And I'm subject to that as well, you know, because no one's perfect, but let's say you hate your job, your body, you know, your gut's telling you have to leave. You still need money at the end of the day. So like there are some things where obviously like that, you know what I mean? You can't necessarily follow every impulse, follow what all your gut's telling you, but yeah, I don't know.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's hard, and that's why you just have to get more and more sensitive to what that voice is saying, even though it's not like an actual voice.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
No, who is it? Eckhart Tolle. You ever read The Power of Now?
Yeah, I love that
right?
book.
Yeah, so I think he calls it the mindful observer. Some kind of observer. But
Okay.
that's right. It's that little voice in back. Your real you, the real sense of you underneath, all the chatter going on up in your top brain, you know, all the external stimuli coming in. That little you that's underneath and usually stays quiet and just watches. That you really only get to be fully when you meditate or, you know, different state, getting into the flow state.
Yeah.
You know, it's that sort of thing.
And I guess you could say maybe like living more through your heart, and where there's not like that place inside of you that you're referencing.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really words there. It's not as like clean cut, and it's not as it's not like a thought, you know, where there's words. Right. It's a lot more subtle.
Mm-hmm. More feeling than.
Yeah, it's like a pull.
Yeah.
And that is more difficult to get sensitive to, because a thought is so much more loud.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so we listen to that a lot more.
Well, thoughts are, it's like, if you think of the ocean, your thoughts, all the external stimuli and your first reaction thoughts to them, that's all the waves up on top. And it'll never be still, ever, entirely. It's trying to take yourself lower and lower into yourself, into the still depths of the water below.
Yeah, that's so funny. I actually use that analogy a lot.
Yeah. I've read that.
Yeah,
that's not mine.
It's not mine either, but I do use it a lot. And yeah, it's that notion that, okay, you're not separate from the waves, but you don't need to get thrashed around them.
You
all
are the whole
time.
ocean,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's not that you are one or the other. And again, it's getting off that polarity. It's
Mm-hmm.
not saying I'm trying to forget that my thoughts exist, or I just want to live underneath and just let everything happen to me, whatever. No, it's like you're of course you're everything. It's just prioritizing, you know, and and I think a lot of people, it's not even, it's having a healthy balance of both too. You're not going to be an effectual person in the world if you don't have any top level thinking, if you're not active, talking to people, even like arguing, getting it, like, I mean, there's a lot of that base things that we try to get away from. The reason I think that you and I are talking about it, that it's become such a push in the last, 10, 20 years or so, especially, is because so much of the world is so getting caught in the opposite, in the top level stuff, that it's just trying to return that balance, trying to return to an equilibrium of that deep, still thought. Mm-hmm. Because you're never going to be able to get rid of the up top, the waves crashing and the distractions, something bad getting thrown into your life, car breaking down, whatever it is. But it's easy to let that become your entire life.
No, definitely.
So.
And I am very much guilty of spending the majority of my time up in the waves.
Oh yeah. This past month, with all everything going on, protests and everything, what started as a quiet quarantine of personal projects and just free creative time turned into obsessive news arguments, just just not good energy to put out there.
Yeah.
And it's not saying that none of that's a positive, or it's not saying that no one should fight, whatever, but it's, for me at least, I didn't have the yin to the yang. Like, it became too much of that. So you have to remember to pull back and give yourself some breathing space too.
Yeah. And by doing that, by giving yourself that breathing space, you can go back into the wave with so much more like effectiveness,
energy,
really.
And clear head, like good positive energy, positive energy for change, for fighting even, you know, there's, again, for me, I try to look at any concept like just a full sphere, you know, translucent, like colored sphere. That there's just, there's so many sides to everything, you know? And
especially like when we're talking about like human rights and things like that, like obviously it's very important. Obviously we need to fight, but if you are exhausting yourself, you're just going to end up exhausted and not effective. And what's really going to benefit the collective the most is if you give yourself a breath, and then you can return with the clarity and, you know, have a position that takes into consideration, is this action actually helping the cause, or is it driving further separation? And that's what often happens. I heard this the other day. It was referencing some of the peace protests that were happening in like the 60s. It's like, I went to a peace protest and I've never seen such an angry and unpeaceful crowd in my life.
No, and even with everything going on this past month, I know I've fallen victim to that too. Just not fighting for change, not fighting from the side of love that I want to get to, but fighting with hate against hate, and the classic fire with fire. It's never going to actually work in the long run. Like, you can overpower someone, but if you're overpowering someone with hate, like, you're going to end up the bad one. And again, in terms of our own collective agreed upon, like, decision on what's good and bad, you know, it's definitely not good to bring hate in against people that you're trying to show love. It's entirely paradoxical.
Completely. And I think that can get super confusing for us, because, you know, if we bring up the like concept that, oh, there's no good or bad, like in our logic minds, we're going to respond, obviously there's good and bad. Like, are you going to say that, I don't know,
Hitler was good and, you know, Buddha was bad? It's like
exactly. No, I know what you're saying. And I definitely struggled with that concept, but the conclusion that I've reached, and the thing that's always served me well without fail, is I just take a pause and I'm saying, okay, I logically in my mind, I can't tell if this is the right or the wrong decision. But then I think, okay, or I'm not thinking, but I'm feeling, is this decision out of love? Is, like, again, like that little space inside me, is that what is guiding the decision? So, and I told my sister this one time, and she made fun of me because I would tell her, I'm like, because we were both struggling with making decisions. And I told her, if every action you make is out of love, you can never be wrong. And then one time we were on the couch and my dog was being so annoying, and I didn't like actually kick her, but I just took my leg and pushed her away. And then she was like, Kat, every decision with love, and then kicks the dog. Like, you're right, that was not with love. She was annoying me, but.
Right. And everyone falls victim to that. To say you're not. And I said that earlier about like the pseudo spiritualists I mentioned, like, see, and I have a problem because I tend to talk to that out of hate. So I'm trying to not do that now, but it's you can't try to pretend to be happy all the time. If anything, that's going to leave a continuous layer of resentment underneath. So you have to feel bad. You have to get angry. Like, I don't regret saying some very choice, angry words to some people this past month, like, that I know were coming from a place of love, like you said, like, but at the same, and vice versa, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, being all love all the time, all good vibes, while bad things are happening immediately around you that you can take action towards, that you should take action towards, just from, again, generally agreed upon ethical values. That's more negative than being negative, like, out of love, out of like a deep passion for what you want to be right in the world, what you believe to be right. you know? So it's, again, there's yin and yang in good and bad. Yeah.
And it's so true. Like, how can we put a label on what is good or bad when it's always going to be the individual's decision? Only the individual can know what is good or bad in that moment. And the same thing, like, love doesn't look like a certain thing. Like, sometimes love looks like a parent punishing their children. Right. In the same way, we curse someone out or we yell at them. And to an outsider, it looks, oh, that person is so angry and full of hate. But, like, they don't know that that was coming from a place of love, and that needed to happen. And the world being at peace, I don't think is necessarily everyone is skipping around in a field singing. You know, sure. I think there's still going to be disagreement. There's still going to be anger, because that's the possibility of all things. Right. We don't want to live on like the positive side of the continuum where only positive things happen. Right. Because for sure, I don't know, that's not life.
No, that would be, we can't even, as hard as I'm trying right now, you can't even picture that. No. Like I can't realistically picture a pure good, happy, all positive adjectives world. I
think that would be a lie.
Yeah, right. That would be a real simulation, because then there has to be a negative. The negative would be you'd have to be drugged up somewhere, laying and feeding someone else, like in the Matrix. You know, like, that's funny. I forget. So I've had like prescribed ADD. I don't think I told you that for years. So apologies. I like randomly lose my thought, but no, I know I do too. I did. I wanted to ask you, like, is it off limits for this to like ask about like what, like after death kind of stuff and like
no, this
that
is,
sort of thing?
Unless like there's something that's obviously like just a wrong topic.
Yeah, well, super too sensitive. Like
but like I'm open to any questions, any topics on this podcast, unless it's like something that's like really, really hateful. Say you're like attacking some group of people or something.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I hope you wouldn't have anyone on that's that too.
I would have to edit that out. Sorry.
No, you're good. Just I guess in general, like, what do you feel like happens? Like after, just, you know, not to go too deep into your personal beliefs, but what do you feel like happens after death?
After death. Again, this is like completely us just theorizing, but I have a few different, I guess, thoughts on it. So the first one being that it's really interesting. I can't remember the name of the man whose theory this was, but he has a theory that we're going to continue evolving, but our consciousness is continuing to evolve. So it's almost that when we die, we like level up or something, or that even during our life, we're going to, at some point in evolution, experience this kind of like sixth dimension or something of like leveling up. So I think that's a really interesting theory. I don't really know how that would look. But something that has been making more and more sense to me as I've looked into it more is, reincarnation. I was like forgetting that word. Because when I had heard of it when I was younger, I'm like, oh, if I'm bad, I turn into a frog. And if I'm good, then I'll be president. I don't know, like something like that. But it started to make sense to me again when I merged that Eastern concept with the Western concept. And I thought, okay, so again, I can't remember the term for this, but when you're born as a child, in your DNA, in your genes, you're carrying past trauma from your mom, your grandma, like all the way back.
Trauma, I think.
Yeah, inherited trauma. Yeah. And similarly, like certain traits, like whether that be certain personality traits or just certain dispositions towards certain things, that carries with you before you even have a say in it. You're just born into that. Similarly, you're born into your certain circumstances, and that's like that nature versus nurture thing, whether like you're a product of your biology or your circumstances. But all of that to say, we are born with certain karmas already there, and then as we go through life, we are, you know, burning some karmas and gaining some more.
I'm glad you brought that up too, instead of, because I, like you said, I originally liked the idea of reincarnation, but it seems too linear,
Yeah.
too polarized. You know, again, it's based off good or bad. I think there's so many more factors that go into that, and to a certain degree, it's the idea of like reincarnation by itself. Or what was that other one you mentioned called?
I don't remember it. I can't even remember the name of the man.
No,
so
but it's okay. But
yeah,
but that,
like leveling up.
Yeah,
in some sense.
But still thinking of that as the only part of that I would want to expand upon would be thinking of ourself, like after we die, as an individual piece of consciousness that goes into another body. Because I really believe that at like a certain depth, like all of our consciousness, like they talk about collective consciousness of people, right? Like how that evolves, you know, over centuries. And it's easy to put a tangible face on that, how we learn, like we all generally know mathematics now. We can call that part of our collective consciousness, like a basic understanding of like elementary level physics, that kind of thing. Like, but at a deeper level, I think that we are very literally tied together in terms of like that essence that you feel that makes you like you deep down, when you're like, oh, like I know this is me, you know, all my labels aside, my job title, you know, my gender, everything else aside, I feel this like spark inside of me that's like a piece of me that I feel like is really like one thread on a giant fabric, like a giant blanket of consciousness in the universe. Not just people either. Like I think that there are little bits of that in
Hi Jess.
Animal. Hey, what's up?
Jess is Scott's roommate. She's cool. If you want to hop in at any point, feel free.
Yeah. Okay, for sure.
No, that's really interesting though, because there's this concept in like Vedic philosophy called Indra's web. And so imagine like this big spider web, and at each node, at each point where the threads cross, there's a little drop of dew. And so you look into that dewdrop, or maybe it's called Indra's net of jewels or something like that, but it's called Indra's net. But just imagine like a little dewdrop, and in that reflection of that dewdrop, you can see all the other dewdrops. And then within even the reflection, inside the reflection, you see all of it like for infinity. So it's cool. Kind of like that same notion that we are individual parts, but we're all reflecting each other infinitively.
I love that. I've never heard of that before. What's that called?
I think it's called Indra's net.
I gotta look that up.
Yeah, it's really cool. I was gonna say something else about that.
I'm a very visual person, and like I love that visual explanation.
Yeah. And the thing is, you know, we can imagine that there's some other realm that we go to where we're not necessarily a human, we're like some other form, right. Or maybe we're more formless. But because we're in a human experience right now, it's just a thought. We can't, like even the whole idea of reincarnation is just a thought. But because we have no reference for anything outside of this experience, it's hard for me to say like, oh, we're going to go to heaven, whatever that means.
Even like reincarnation, right? Like ending up as like an insect, or, you know, I mean, we're already kind of top of the food chain looking at a basic level, but yeah, let's say a very powerful, well-off person, materially well-off person, or like an insect, whether you live good or bad. It's the same idea as heaven or hell, like traditional heaven or hell. Which again, I don't think it's that simple, like you're saying. I feel like there's so many other things connecting, and some people, if you want to look at it at a base level of evaluating it, I guess I'm sure some people are set up in life based on their past conscious experiences or past connections made in the universe.
Yeah,
I'm sure that they're set up for a more superficially enjoyable life.
Yeah. Like
for sure. But at the same time, like I feel like depending on your free will, depending on like how you choose what you choose in your life, you can live a better life, like very literally better, a more enjoyable, happier, like in every way, if not materially more successful, starting off in a terrible position.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the whole journey. That's the whole drama of that, like, of the story that we play out. And it comes back to this thing, like, once you quote unquote, like, have everything, you're not going to be satisfied, because it's the journey, it's the process, whether that
Right.
be living a human life or like making a piece of art or making it down the mountain.
I think it's also it's defining what you want in terms of trying to define what you want in terms of something you can get out of a process. Because putting the importance of your life, all your energy behind an end goal, as soon as you get to that end goal, you have like what are you working towards? Where's all your energy going once you've achieved it? That's why people have their midlife crisis.
Yeah.
People, right? They work really hard. It's not to say that money's bad by itself. It's not to say that material success is bad inherently, but people will set themselves up as this is the end goal. I want to make a bunch of money. I want to get a house. I want to do all these things. And they don't ask themselves why. They don't ask what they're going to do once they get it. They just know they want to get it because they're told or for whatever reason. Then they get there, they get it all, and they're miserable. And they don't know why. And at that point, you're slowly over, the years of living as a human being, your neuroplasticity slows down. You slowly become less able to look at new perspectives and change the way that you think. Not say that you ever can stop or anything like that, but for just the way that our society's set up, you definitely slow down over time. So it's sad to see when that happens, when people will lose half of their physical years or more chasing something without knowing why, without ever stopping to ask themselves why, or ask themselves what they're going to do when they get it, and it's just,
It's really devastating. And you can look at it in that sense of, oh, I'm 40, and was I even really there? Was I even really enjoying this thing that we don't know what it is? But we say that we get maybe 60, 70 years, and then who knows what happens after we die. But let's be here for it,
Even, sorry, just on that same note, even people that at a very, thinking of a lot of the American population, my parents included to a certain level, thinking of a very literal definition of heaven or hell, right? Even you live your whole life, let's say not material success, you live a very good, quote, good life, helping people, all this stuff. If your goal is only just to get somewhere afterwards, how do you even know what that'll look like? Let's say you end up in your physical body, whatever, somewhere off there, where you have everything you want, quote unquote, everything you want. If you've never asked yourself what you want or defined that, very tangibly defined that, said it out loud, written it down, what's going to be there? You know what I mean? Everyone talks about you want to live a good life so you can go to heaven. What does that look like to you? Yeah. I'm not saying anything's wrong or right or anything like this, but I think a lot of people don't even bother to define what they want to be a heavenly state. Because they just look at what they don't want. And yeah.
And that's a really interesting concept, because I've read this before, is that heaven is not a place and hell is not a place. It's happening right now. And you get to decide, even though it's going to take a lot of unlearning and a lot of passion and direction and commitment and having to surrender into that flow state. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, we create heaven or hell right here, right now.
I agree.
And to get into heaven, all we need to do is come into the here and now. And all these religions are pointing to, God and evil and this, and it's all outside of ourselves. Right. And it reinforces this illusion of separateness, and it externalizes what we're trying to get. Right. And we don't even know why we're trying to get it. We're just okay, there's a promise of something better in the future, and it takes us out of the here and now where life is happening. Right. Life is not happening in the future. It wasn't happening in your past. It's happening now. And if you want to take religion and apply those concepts, which are all pointing to the same thing, and apply them to your life, you find God in the present moment. Right. And God is not, in my experience, it's not a person. It's not, it's nothing outside of ourselves. It's he's transcendent and immanent in every single thing. And to get into heaven and to come to God is to like literally just let go and stop forcing and enjoy life.
Entirely be.
Yeah, entirely be, and stop trying to have all these labels and all these constrictions and all these I'm better or worse than that person or whatever that may be. And when we talk about purpose, I didn't come up with this concept, but we have our external purpose or our material purpose, which is I'm going to be a dope musician. I'm going to be a dope artist. I'm going to crank out tunes for the people. And that's your external purpose and material purpose. And that is going to change. But a lot of people are so identified with that material purpose that they fail to recognize that that is a lot more irrelevant than your internal purpose, which is to be here now.
Right.
And it takes the pressure off of that external purpose and actually makes you more effective in materializing your dreams.
Right.
If you are operating out of now.
And as less ego involved or as least ego involved as I can, that's what I'm trying to do with like what we did last weekend.
Yeah.
Going down to the beach.
Talk about it.
Yeah. So last weekend we went down to the beach with some friends, set up. We have this little mobile setup with speakers and battery, basically an entirely like off the grid DJ setup. And the idea with that again is so many people start DJing or producing music or anything along those lines with the intention and idea of like getting famous or making money, right? And like I remember consciously deciding early on that like I don't want money ever for any of this. And that doesn't mean to say I'm going to turn down money if someone wants to give it to me, but that in like very, very actively like not setting this up like for free, just having the purpose be just to play music with my friends is to try to get to that present moment.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start like reaching for something that someone else has to give you, recognition, money, anything like that, anything that comes from somebody else, it's not the whole project, the whole activity, the effort, getting it, like it's no longer a flow thing. It's a climb, there's anxiety attached to it. There's all these other things that come in when I'm looking out towards something in the future instead of just focusing on what we're doing in the present. Which I know that just got super conceptual again right off the bat. Damn it.
We've been getting really
my
conceptual,
bad.
but it's all good.
This is what happens when I also haven't, when I've been furloughed for months and just been by myself for the most part and just get super in my own head. But
but these are like thoughts and concepts. Like it is very conceptual, but it's all pointing to the very essence or like the very fundamental principles of
this
life,
human thing.
And if we can take these really simple concepts and learn how to apply them, again, they're very simple. And with anything, when we're trying to like come home to ourselves in the present moment, things aren't going to get more complicated. It's going to get more simple. It's a process of unlearning. But when we're able to operate out of these very simple principles, that's when we're going to be most effective in doing so.
Yeah.
So it is all very conceptual, but it's all pointing to literally the very, very basics of what we're doing here.
Exactly. No, and it's like what we were talking about religion earlier, or like what comes next, any of that. It's interesting. It's fun to a certain extent to talk about, and even just in questioning. I think almost sometimes questioning without looking for a concrete answer can get you closer to the quote unquote truth than trying to derive a solution out of like a problem.
Yes.
Just asking it and just being a part of the questioning, just a part of like that flow. Like slowly we're like 2 drops in the stream trying to divert the water to like a better source, it's away from like the trash pile over there.
No, I really like that. And that's a really cool way of phrasing it, as being part of the questioning, because ultimately all of the humans, we're all trying to live out this thing, and we don't know why we're here. We don't know what we're doing. We're just trying for something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just trying to be happy or whatever.
Trust me, I wake up, like when I was working, I'd go into work some days. I'm just like, what is like the point of everything?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, again, you have to think in material, concrete terms. Like, what would be different if I just quit my job, sold my things, rented, you know, bought a cheap van and just went and lived down by the beach? Like, because then, okay, you know, well, then I won't have internet. I won't be able to produce music. I won't have like all these things that I enjoy doing, and yin and yang to both of those. But again, it's what do you want to look at? The world is, that's it. It is. The universe is all. It's good and bad and everything in between. And so we are lucky enough to be able to consciously think and talk about and decide what we want to look at and what we don't.
Yeah. And yeah, it's not to say that doing the 9 to 5 is good or bad, or living in a van is good or bad, but it's really like, what do you want to do?
Right.
And what's going to help you best live out of love and service, and what's going to make you feel most connected to yourself and to others and to life.
Right.
And that's going to look completely different to every single person. So how can we tell another person the way you're living is wrong? Because that's not the way that I am living, or the way that I think I should be living.
I've been trying this past month to get better with that too. Similar to like the protesting things, just trying to, if anyone wants to show someone or try to convince people of something, right? Everyone knows lead by example. The best way to make a change is just to embody that change. Is just to be like, not to preach it. I've done plenty of that myself, which like I'm not proud of. And it's not to say that there's not a time to stand up and be vocal to more voices that will hear it, you know, other than if they're not watching you, whatever. But I know I've been bad with that, and it goes back to that trying to fight hate with hate, you know, trying to say, hey, you know, everybody love everybody. Like, you know, it's ineffectual.
For sure. And this is actually like a Bible verse. Again, I'm not gonna be able to like repeat it verbatim, but it says, you know, if you're really living your life of truth, and I think the words that they use is if you have Jesus in your heart, meaning that, you know, you're living a life of truth and love and service, you don't need to preach to other people. They're going to see how brightly you're shining, and they're going to ask you, how can I be like that? Right. And again, see, like, you go to the Bible, which I've in the past had a lot of resistance to and resentment towards, but now by like letting all of my labels fall away, I can see they're all pointing to the same thing. Right. And yeah, like if you're living your truth and you're shining so brightly, and people look at you and say, wow, that person just is flowing through life, and they're just so kind and loving no matter their circumstances, and they're at some point they're going to say, I want to live like that. Right. Not necessarily that they want to live the exact material life that you're living, but they want to be in their own expression as someone who is full of light. For sure. And there's like this poster that I see everywhere of Buddha, and it says, a single candle can light 1,000 flames, and like that original flame won't be diminished any, which apparently is actually, the Buddha never said that. Oh, really? But yeah, which is funny.
I like that though.
No, I like that too. And it's along the same vein as, you know, if you learn how to shine that light from within, from, you know, finding that internal purpose and finding that presence, then you know that you never need to reach outside of yourself to be full, that you're always full, and then other people can see that light within you and recognize their own light.
And that's for almost every human endeavor that we take on, the intrinsic value versus extrinsic. Like, as soon as you're looking for some other source, someone else to validate your happiness or give you it or anything like that, you're never going to have it. Like fully, you're never going to embody it. You can have it for a minute, but it's just dependent on that same external source to come and go. You know, whereas if you try to make it internal and make it about the process, make it here and now, then it's forever.
Yeah. And that's like another thing, like with if you ask anyone what they really want in life, almost everyone's going to say, oh, I just want to be happy.
Right.
And, all of their career endeavors and relationships and physical well-being and all of that, they're willing to let that go in order to have happiness, because that's everyone's like end goal, like this place of like eternal love and peace and joy. But if you ask most people and you say, oh, well, are you happy? They'd be like, well, I would be happy if X, Y, and Z were happening. And so they're placing conditions on their happiness, and they're saying, I'm only going to let myself be happy if X, Y, and Z are present in my external world.
Right.
And so it's so hard to let go of X, Y, and Z and just say, okay, fine, like I can be happy no matter what's happening.
Right.
And the more that you tap into that and live from that place, the easier stuff is.
Yeah. Well, it's right. It's not even easier. Yeah. But I feel like that's when you are happy.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
it's,
that's
like
happiness that's unconditional. That's happiness that's not a reaction to something, or
yes.
it's not an emotion.
Yeah.
It's a state.
Exactly. When people say they want to be happy, so I'm going to do something that doesn't make me happy to get there, it's like you're missing it. Like that's the exact opposite of what you just said you wanted. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy because we're talking about it and we do that all the time.
Oh, of course. And
yeah.
Right. Like we're not immune to this. Like, we'll have this talk, or I'll read some book or meditate or feel great. And like 10 minutes later, something comes into my life and and I'm swearing to myself, like,
right.
of course, like, I think it's incredibly egotistical to be like, again, it's like the good vibes only, whatever. It's like, no, of course not. Like, we're all human. Like, we all have flaws. We all get mad and angry and do things we regret, and we're all of it. Yeah. It's just what's your direction, right? Go back to the stream. Like, you're always going to have little, things shooting off. You're always going to have stones in the way, whatever, like this. But it's like, are you still going in the right way? Are you still going towards where you want to go eventually? Because if you do that, then everything else is inconsequential in the long run.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull another question for you.
For sure.
Let me take a peek here. It's funny, we actually touched on most of these just through our genuine conversation. I didn't even have to ask.
I love that.
So, Teddy, my roommate who I had on the podcast last time, he actually had a question for you. So
nice.
He said, what does freedom mean to you?
I think freedom, I'm going to step back from the metaphysical that we've been on and talk more concrete, like earthbound.
Let's bring it back down.
Yeah. Physical realm. Okay. Freedom for me means the ability to do, for every person to do as they please, that so long as it's not infringing on the freedom of someone else.
I like it. And that's so
even though that's a self-contained definition, damn it. You're using freedom in there. But you understand the idea, right? It's out of all politics, I would say I'm most libertarian. Like, obviously there's some things like like we need as a society. But yeah, it's being able to do what you want and in a way that doesn't hurt anyone else. That's in no way negative on someone else. And as soon as we come into those human interactions, I mean, that's case by case.
Exactly.
To try to,
and you deal with it in the moment as it occurs. There's no guidebook for right or wrong in each of those scenarios. It's just you deal with it as it comes and you act out of your heart in that situation.
To say to live free is, I think that's like an oxymoron. Because by living, we're inherently going to come across times where we cannot have true freedom. Like freedom by itself, like the idealistic freedom, is what I said. I think it's the ability to do whatever you want. Like, honestly, yeah. Like to do whatever you want out of I don't want to say out of love, because that's still like binary, like,
Yeah.
you know, on a scale. But yeah, to do what you want that is within the confines of like moral value,
Yeah.
ethical value. Yeah.
No, I see what you're pointing at, and I completely agree. And I really think that this just goes back to that river metaphor that
I love
that
it.
we keep going to is like when I think of freedom in an idealistic sense, or what most people think of when freedom comes to mind, is again like I feel like when society defines freedom, it's almost like you have control. But I think that actual freedom is you're letting go of that control. And again, you're allowing life to move through you without you having to constantly make sure that life doesn't fall apart.
I like that.
And it's kind of like the ocean metaphor as well. The waves are happening on top, the stillness is underneath, and neither one is more true. You're the whole thing. But the first time that you sink to the bottom of the ocean and you get a breath, you're going to be like, oh my God, like this is freedom.
You'd like, wait, I could have been here this whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you stay down there long enough and then you're like, oh wait, this isn't freedom because I missed that.
There's things happening up top.
Yeah.
There's like, you know, my boat, whatever, which do matter, right? You gotta, you still have to navigate this world. Like,
yeah,
you can't, it's balance.
It is. I think true freedom is balance. And you see you have like one side of the coin, which is, I don't know, say like that soul, that place where you can rest and say, okay, I am having this human thing. I don't know what it is, but there's a little place inside of me that is okay. That's still, no matter what's happening on the outside, I will always be okay. Like maybe not my physical body, maybe not my feelings, maybe not my ego, but
that inner mind,
like my maybe like soul can never be hurt. But we are human, we're in the thing, so it is our duty to live a human life and to interact with other people and to connect and to serve our outer purpose and to experience this thing. And so to live in either extreme is limiting our experience, because either we're so caught up in the activity or we're like detached, or
we're letting bad things, collectively agreed upon bad things, happen, which we could be preventing by being too absorbed in our own peace of mind.
Definitely. And I think that true freedom rests in being up in the waves, but knowing that if you ever need a breath, you can go back down. And it's funny going underwater for a breath, but
it's
hopefully
like,
you guys are following.
It's like going to sleep for a breath, for your soul breath, I think. No, I get that.
Well, I kind of feel like this is a good place to end it.
I feel like we covered a lot of stuff.
We did.
And I can ramble. Trust me, I could ramble for hours about this shit. But
me too.
It's been good.
Well, Scott, I am really excited that you agreed to be on this. I think that it flowed really well. I think so. I really enjoyed having you on.
Thanks so much for having me. I can't believe I feel honored.
I feel honored. I love talking to you.
Let's go make some drip paintings.
Yeah, we're going to have a little crafty art sesh after this. I just wanted to close out with a few things. Send your questions into the show. We would love to answer them. Anything. It can literally be about something. You can ask me what my favorite meme is. You can ask me a deep, deep question. But yeah, no, send them in. And also, it would help us out to get the show out to more ears, if that's the will of things.
Give her a follow.
Yeah. Subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, share this podcast with your friends and family if you liked it. But yeah, this show's on Apple Podcasts. We've got video recordings on YouTube or on Spotify and Google Podcasts. If you want to support the show, there's some links in the show notes. We got a Patreon page. And reach out to me, send me a DM. You can visit the show page at kellis.co/podcasts. I think that's about it. But Scott, do you want to add any plugs? Where can people find you? What are you up to?
For sure. If anyone's interested in bass music in any form, feel free to give me a follow or check me out on SoundCloud and Instagram at Scotty Mars. If anyone's in San Diego and listening, come follow Renegade Sounds Events on Instagram. We got, as socially distanced as possible events happening around on the beaches, little impromptu gatherings, trying to be as present as possible with bass-loving friends, But yeah, hopefully, either way, Kat, appreciate you guys having me on, and best of luck with this. This is sick.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope to connect with you all some more. Send me your feedback, and no matter what you're doing, just keep living with love and keep doing your thing. Peace.
That was sick. Damn, it sounds
Dude,
so
right?
loud.
Doesn't that like fly by? Awesome.
That was sick.
Dude, that was tight. Oh, I'm gonna save this before something awful.
Oh my god, no. Yeah, sorry, I'm sure Teddy's was much more coherent, but I tend to like that.
No, it was really good. I feel like with him, I tend to overpower the conversation.
Yeah.
And so when I was like listening back to our podcast, like, oh my god, I'm talking so much.
And I tend to like do that to people, so.
No, but I think it was a balance.
Yeah.
It was a really good balance. I think we both were talking really